By the middle of the 1980s, New York City was on the brink of collapse. Crime was rampant everywhere. Murder rates were climbing sharply. Crack cocaine had saturated the streets. Entire neighborhoods felt abandoned, not governed by law but by fear. Times Square had turned into a hub of adult theaters, prostitutes, and drug dealers. Mugging incidents were so frequent that some residents carried mugger money simply to get through the encounter. The city that never sleeps had slowed to a near halt. And beneath the surface, conditions were even more dire. The subway system, once praised as a marvel of engineering, had transformed into something resembling a battleground. Train cars were covered with graffiti. Lights were either dim or completely out. Emergency exits were sealed tight. Every subway ride came with a silent hope you'd arrive without harm. In 1984 alone, over 15,000 felonies were reported within the subway. Robberies, assaults, and stabbings. That amounted to more than 40 serious crimes a day in the tunnels. For many New Yorkers, it wasn't about getting home quickly anymore, it was about getting home alive. And that's where our story begins, aboard the Downtown 2 train just days before Christmas. So what happens when fear becomes the norm? When the justice system seems broken? And when a man decides to enforce the law himself? Let's explore today in the land of history. We'll try to answer these very questions. If a person has to sink to the level of an animal just to survive in the city, if you take a rat for example, I admit I was ruthless. I told the guys, I don't know if this is a good comparison, but if you corner a rat and start poking it repeatedly with red-hot needles, and it can't figure out how to defend itself, eventually, once in a while, the rat might just turn vicious, becoming a relentless killer. That was me. So don't judge morality by saying, this wasn't justified, or, you should have just shown the gun. I've been in situations where I did just that. What happened here is this: I lost it. Bernard Goetz wasn't who you'd expect. He wasn't a police officer, nor a soldier. He was a quiet electronics repairman, soft-spoken and wiry, just another anonymous face. But in 1981, Goetz was mugged in a subway station by 3 young men. He was beaten, robbed, and left with a permanent limp. He filed a complaint and even identified his attackers. But the justice system barely punished them. Goetz got the message loud and clear. The city wouldn't protect him. So he obtained a gun illegally. He bought a .38 caliber revolver in Florida and carried it concealed in New York City without a permit. It wasn't about looking tough. He carried it because, to him, New York was a jungle and he was done being prey. Over the next 3 years, crime worsened rather than improved. Subway muggings, slashings, even random killings became regular news. The police were understaffed. Prosecutors overwhelmed. Most residents only tried to survive. Mayor Ed Koch was in charge, loud, combative, always ready with a catchy line. He promised to restore law and order, but the reality was different. Crime kept climbing, and courts handed out plea bargains like parking tickets. Under Koch, the streets grew meaner, grittier, and far more dangerous. Goetz didn't seek trouble, but if it found him, he was prepared. Then, on December 22, 1984, trouble arrived. Just 3 days before Christmas, Bernard Goetz boarded the southbound 2 train at 14th Street, carrying his concealed .38 under his jacket. The train was moderately packed, the type of ride where passengers avoided eye contact. Then 4 young black men, Troy Canty, Barry Allen, James Rumsauer, and Darrell Cabby, stepped into the same car. They approached Goetz. One Canty said, "Give me $5. To Goetz, this wasn't a request. It was a threat. He believed he was about to be mugged again, and this time he wasn't going to hesitate. He pulled out his revolver and fired. 4 men collapsed to the floor. Then he walked over to Cabby, paused, and said, "You don't look too bad. Here's another." He fired a 5th shot into Cabby's spine. The entire incident lasted seconds, but what followed was odd. As the smoke cleared, frightened passengers moved to the other end of the train, but when they realized Goetz wasn't crazed, just a man with a gun and a target, no one confronted him. Someone asked if he was a cop. Goetz calmly denied it, then exited the train and disappeared into the city. No one stopped him. No one called the police. In a crime-ridden city, some might have thought, perhaps this man wasn't the villain after all. But this story was far from straightforward. The teens weren't innocent, but they weren't faceless criminals either. Troy Canty and Barry Allen had multiple arrests for theft and minor offenses. James Rancière had been charged with rape and was out on bail. And Darrell Cabby, the one who was hit with the final shot to the spine, had no criminal record at all. He was a music student full of promise, now left paralyzed for life. Goetz didn't know any of that. To him, it was a threat and he fired. Yet the city would spend years debating whether he was a crime victim or a symbol of something darker. For 9 days, Bernard Goetz disappeared. The NYPD launched an extensive manhunt. Sketches of the subway gunman covered newspapers. Rumors spread fast. Some claimed he was ex-military. Others said he was part of a vigilante group. The reality was much simpler. Goetz fled to New England. He hid out quietly in New Hampshire, watching the chaos from a distance. But when the pressure mounted too high, he walked into a police station in Concord and turned himself in. His confession was chillingly calm. Goetz told detectives he'd been mugged before and refused to let it happen again. He described the shootings with cold precision and even acted out the event for investigators. He admitted firing the 5th shot, the one that paralyzed Cabby, along with the harsh words he allegedly said just prior. "The guy who was still standing, I was sure I had shot him," Goetz said. "It was strange. I wanted an answer. To be honest, I needed to know if I missed. I went to him again and looked at him. He probably didn't recall because he was maybe unconscious. I don't know if I hit him or not. I said, 'You seem all right. Here's another.'" That confession would later form the legal basis of his trial. Outside the courtroom, Goetz had already become something else, a national symbol. To many New Yorkers, he was a hero, a man who stood up against criminals when the system had failed them. Letters of support poured in. Some even sent money for his defense. To others, he was a cold-blooded racist who executed 4 young black men just for approaching him on a train. Civil rights advocates called for justice. The media dubbed him the subway vigilante, and the case ignited a nationwide firestorm. But just when public opinion seemed sharply divided along racial and political lines, something unexpected happened. One victim's mother, a woman with every reason for anger, spoke out. And what she said shocked the city. "I would say to him, I'm sorry about the state of our society." While her words didn't end the controversy, they made one thing clear. This story was never simply black and white. On talk shows, in barbershops, and around kitchen tables, everyone had an opinion. Was it self-defense or racial violence? As the trial neared, that divide deepened. The legal system now had to untangle what the public already decided. Goetz faced charges of attempted murder, assault, reckless endangerment, and illegal possession of a weapon. The trial focused on a single question: self-defense or revenge? The prosecution argued Goetz went too far, especially by circling back and firing that final shot at Daryl Cabby. They claimed it wasn't fear but rage, revenge, possibly hate. But Goetz had one of the best defense lawyers, Barry Slotnick. Slotnick didn't just defend Goetz, he used the city's fear as a weapon. He told jurors Goetz wasn't a monster, but a reflection of every New Yorker who had ever looked over their shoulder, flinched at a sudden noise, or prayed they'd make it home alive. Goetz didn't testify, Slotnick didn't need him. The jury deliberated for days. When the verdict came, it shocked the nation. Not guilty of attempted murder, not guilty of assault, not guilty of reckless endangerment. Only guilty of illegal possession of a weapon. Goetz served 8 months in jail. He was released in 1989. To some, he remained a hero. To others, a symbol of injustice. But the story continued. In 1996, more than a decade later, Daryl Cabby, now wheelchair-bound, sued Goetz in civil court. This time, Goetz testified. He stood firm, saying he was proud of his actions and would do the same again if faced with the same threat. This jury was less forgiving. They awarded Cabby $43 million in damages, $18 million for pain and suffering, $25 million in punitive fines. Goetz declared bankruptcy and never paid the judgment. But the story didn't end in court. What happened to the others? Of the 4 men shot that day, Daryl Cabby was left paralyzed from the waist down. Once a promising music student, his life shattered by a single bullet. Troy Canty and Barry Allen continued to have minor legal troubles but eventually faded from the public eye. James Roncière, who already faced serious charges at the time, was later convicted of rape. In 2007, on the 23rd anniversary of that subway ride, he died of a drug overdose in a Bronx motel. Bernard Goetz faded from the headlines but stayed in New York City. He opened a small electronics repair shop. Later he took up urban gardening. For a time he even kept pet squirrels in his apartment. In 2013 he was arrested again for selling marijuana to an undercover cop, but the charges were dropped. He reappeared briefly for interviews, still unapologetic. "I did what I had to do," he said. "I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6. The Goetz case left a lasting mark on New York City. It exposed deep racial divides, public fear, and a system's failure to protect its citizens. In time, New York became safer. Crime rates dropped. The subway was cleaned up. But debate over Bernard Goetz never truly ended. Was he a vigilante, a racist, a victim, or just a man who broke under pressure in a city already unraveling? Share your thoughts on Bernard Goetz in the comments below. Thank you for watching Land of History. Please like, share, and subscribe. If you have comments or show ideas, we'd love to hear from you. Thanks again.